Hello and welcome to our first episode of Step 1 Health. Thank you for joining me. Today we'll be discussing safer needle use, specifically in regards to blood-borne infections. So that includes things such as hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV. One of the public health issues in our region, as well as in many regions around the world, is the issue of blood-borne infections. That is, infections that are spread from one person to another through blood spread between people. One of the more common ways that this happens is through shared needles or drug use products. As such, several different agencies in our region work together to develop community-based needle distribution program guidelines and kits that look similar to this. These are available in your communities and in many areas throughout Canada and around the world through your local public health departments. As healthcare providers, we sometimes get questions from community members or people who are not drug users asking why needle distribution programs exist, whether they might increase the risk of people using drugs. This has been studied quite extensively, and we know that programs such as needle distribution programs do not increase the number of people starting to use drugs or the number how often people use drugs. But what they do is seem to reduce the risk of people getting infections, help give people a chance to actually connect with healthcare providers or social service providers to, for example, learn about safer drug use, to talk about whether they should be tested for infections, or if they might be ready to think about stepping back from their drug use. It gives them a connection with someone that they can talk to about referrals or treatments that might be available. We want to protect our community members, whether that's you yourself or your friends and loved ones, from picking up some of these infections that can be quite serious. The most common infection that is spread through needle use in our region and in many areas throughout the world is hepatitis C, which is an infection that affects the liver. We'll discuss hep C itself in more detail in a future episode, but for today we'll talk specifically about the components of a needle distribution kit. So we'll go through one of these kits. I'll explain what the different components are, why they're part of the kit, and some of the basic safety reasons for their use. In our region, the most commonly used substances are various opioid pills that are dissolved in water and then injected. Of course, pills are meant to be swallowed, so there's no 100% safe way of using them as injections, but we'll go through the components of the kit and the safest possible use for those people who are using these substances. The first component of the kit is usually a collection of about 10 needles. These are very fine gauge needles, meaning they have a very narrow tip, and the reason for that is to minimize damage to the veins. The next component of the kit is the cooker, which is a sterile version of a spoon or other household item that people might otherwise be using. Opening these packages, we'll see that there is the small metal spoon. They come in various colors so that if more than one person is using together, each person can have their own spoon to minimize the risk of spreading infections. These come with a small plastic handle labeled up and down that can be carefully applied to the spoon. You'll want to, of course, minimize touching inside the spoon or touching any of the other components with your hands because of the risk of spreading bacteria. Packages also contain sterile cotton filters. These filters are important to use as opposed to other items that people might be using as filters, such as cotton wool, tampons, cigarette filters. Those items might contain loose bits of cotton that could come loose and end up in the bloodstream, or in the case of cigarette filters, can contain bits of glass that, of course, you also don't want to be injecting into the bloodstream. So these are kind of tightly packed bits of cotton. Next, we have these small containers of sterile water. It's important to be using this as opposed to tap water or water from any other source that, especially water from, say, ponds or other outdoor sources, are very likely to contain a lot of bacteria and parasites, things that you don't want to be injecting into your bloodstream. Next, we have quite a large collection of alcohol swabs. It's really important to be cleaning the area thoroughly before injecting. The kits lastly include tourniquet. There are usually a few of these in the kit. These are used to help veins distend if necessary. Kits might contain a few other items, such as, for example, extra filters or condoms, because these infections can be spread any way that blood is spread between people, including sex where there's a chance of blood. So these are the components of the typical kit. In speaking with people who are substance users, I know that many people have got the message that it's really important not to be sharing needles, but it's been my experience that there are many people who are still sharing other components to the kit. So for example, I see that it's quite common that people might be sharing a piece of a pill, and so several people might be using the same cooker. If blood is being used in any way to dissolve the pill, or if the same users are putting the needle in and out of the cooker more than once, that is also a very serious risk of spreading bloodborne infections. A group in Seattle studied the method of transmission of infections in the population they were working with. And in those people, they found that in over half of them, they acquired Hep C, not through the use of shared needles, but through the use of shared spoons or cookers. So this is, of course, a really important message. And one of the key messages today is that I think many people have learned not to share needles, and that message has sunk in. But the importance of not sharing any of these other supplies is really important. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to show you a little demonstration of simulated use to show how infection can be spread from person to person. So to demonstrate what we were just showing, we're going to imagine that we have two users, and these bowls are going to represent their bloodstreams. So we'll put some water in each of those. Now I'm going to add some food coloring to this user right here. So we'll mix that up so it's nice bright color so it's visible. So our two users, our two imaginary users here, have learned the message that sharing needles is risky, so they don't share needles, but they sometimes reuse needles or share a cooker. So the next time they've done what they're supposed to. They've used the sterile water and heated the spoon to try and kill the germs, but hepatitis C in particular is really hard to kill. So this user is going to draw up from here and inject into their bloodstream, and maybe they didn't quite get half, so they're going to go a second time with a little bit of the blood might be in their bloodstream in the needle still, so they're going to go into the needle again and draw up their amount of drug and inject it into their bloodstream. Now the second user, again, this needle has never touched this person, is going to go into that shared spoon and then into their bloodstream. Now I don't know if you can see it in there, but there's definitely a pink color to this water. So just those few tiny, tiny drops of blood from this user got into this person's bloodstream. And so if one of those drops of blood had a Hep C virus in it, then it's possible that Hep C, or of course any other virus that this person had in their bloodstream, could have been transmitted. Okay, thank you for tuning in. I hope you found that informative in terms of understanding what the needle exchange kits are and why they are available. If you'd like more information for those who are using, perhaps about the safest procedures for injecting, or a little bit more about some of these bloodborne infections, please check out the links down below. There's some great links from Katie and Blood to Blood that have all kinds of information that would hopefully be of use to you. Thanks for tuning in. As I mentioned, if you think there's any chance you might have picked up one of these bloodborne infections, contact your healthcare provider. So for example, the team that you got the needle exchange kit from, so the nursing station, provincial health unit, or whatever care provider you feel you can approach about getting tested, because if you know that you have one of these viruses, we can help you access treatment to minimize the damage and the risks that those viruses pose to you. And sometimes even minimize the risk of those being spread to other people. Next week, we'll be doing part B of our discussion of safer needle use, the risks of reusing equipment, even if it's only one person reusing them. Thanks, and goodbye.